Norwood City School District Board of Education for Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Ms. Ballard.
Present.
Mrs. Rarica.
Present.
Mr. Taylor is absent. Mrs. Towner.
Present.
Mr. Atwood.
Present. All right, next, can I have everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item of housekeeping that we have is Section 3, and that's the adoption of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll motion to adopt. I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Camphouse, please call the roll.
Ms. Ballard.
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica.
Yes.
Mrs. Towner.
Yes.
Mr. Atwood.
Yes. All right, with the agenda approved, we're going to go to Section 4 of our agenda, and this is our discussion items. And tonight, we're going to get a report from Mrs. Chesson on the state report card presentation, our director of curriculum. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Christina Chesson.
Okay, thank you, President Atwood. I am pleased tonight to present our local report card, our state report card review from last year, year 24-25. And I appreciate the time, and I know there'll be some level of details in here, so bear with me because I know this is a high interest thing for all of you. So we'll move through it, but we'll pay attention to all of the parts. Just as a review, the report card is made up of 6 components, and this year, our report card added a component, and we've talked about that before, but our first 2 most important components are achievement and progress. And then the other 4 components carry the same weight. Achievement and progress, whether it's a district or a school, will always carry the largest percentile in terms of a weight for the report card. So we have achievement component and progress. Then we have our graduation component, which represents 2 years of graduation information. Our newly brought to the table college, career, workforce, and military readiness component, our early literacy component, and then our gap closing component. So that brings, with all those components are weighted together, you get an overall rating. So I am pleased to report that for Norwood, we maintained our 3.5 overall rating, which meant that we met state standards from all 6 of those components. That's showing solid progress and overall achievement for our district. So we're happy, we're glad to be in that arena, and we always have opportunities for continuous improvement. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we work through. So at a glance, you can see that we achieved 3 stars for achievement, which is the same as last year. Our progress, which continues to be a strength for our district, is 4 stars, and progress is all about growth for students. Gap closing is a 3-star, and most of our schools are at a 3-star rating for gap closing as well. Our graduation, you'll see a little movement there, which we're always happy to see, an extra star in our work. Early literacy is a 2-star rating, and then for the first time reported, the college, career, workforce, and military readiness is a 4-star rating for our district. And we'll talk a lot about that as well. So some celebrations are in order for continuing to highlight the growth of our students, and also as we brought forth the new component and a bump up for graduation. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. At a glance, here's some percentages, but we'll share that out. Before we go into the detail, just also at a glance, here are how our schools rated, and the schools are listed on the left-hand side with the overall rating in that first column. So we'll talk about each school as well, because I know that level of detail is of interest. And again, highlighting that new CCWM readiness report of 4 stars. So let's start with achievement. In achievement, as I said, we are at a 3-star rating. And as a reminder, I always like to put the rating scale and the descriptions in here because, believe it or not, they change from each component, and they also change if you're a district or a school. And I think that's important to know. It's not the same system that they use for schools as they use for districts. So that's important, just as an awareness point. So achievement is based, like they all are, on the 5-star rating. and we are in the middle with a 3-star rating for that. So achievement is just that. It is our state test achievement rating, starting with 3rd grade, moving up to 8th grade in the areas of English language arts and mathematics, and then in 5th grade and 8th grade in the area of science. You'll also see that at the high school level, in that other section of the page, it highlights all of our high school end of course exams. We have another end of course exam that we haven't really seen before. You are allowed to do a Mathematics 1 assessment for certain students that are a part of their program. So that's highlighted, but for us, it was certainly less than 10 students. New to this achievement data and talking about performance is that chart at the very bottom of the slide deck, that page, it highlights students that are taking tests above their respective grade level. So these are students that are accelerated in mathematics. They have a grade level acceleration or content area acceleration rather, for mathematics. We had 20 students take advantage of that situation for Algebra 1 and 18 for geometry last year. And that will change throughout the years, but this is the first time they've highlighted that. So I thought it was nice to bring your attention to that particular information. Using this as achievement data, in the past, the goal was always be higher than the state and or beat 80%. So they use this achievement data, and I know you all know this, I'm kind of saying this for everyone who might be new to the arena. And as a reminder, they calculate what's called the performance index. So if I'm a student in 4th grade and I take a mathematics test and I score proficient, I go on the proficient line and I'm counted, I've given points for that work. If I'm proficient, I'm given 1 point for that work. If you start at the bottom and work your way up, you have students that perhaps were untested for all sorts of reasons, perhaps. So just as a reminder, we work really hard to get all of our students into the testing cycle within the windows because they're windowed. So last year we had 1.5% of our students that weren't able to be captured with the testing through no fault of any of our staff members or administrators. People work really hard to help students that are healthy and well to come into school and take the test. But if that does happen, those students will have 0 points for that, obviously. And then each of those respective achievement levels are given points for that work. The Advanced Plus, we've talked about that before. If you are a gifted student and score at the advanced range for whatever content area you're taking, you will get what's called a bump up for that work because you're taking a more advanced course in those mathematic fields that I just kind of highlighted. So with that said, all of those points received and they're generated a number of 80.4. That performance index is divided by that number listed there, 109.8. And that represents the highest average of the top 2% of schools in the state of Ohio. So they take the average of that. That is the maximum number of performance that any school was able to do in Ohio this past year. So that changes each year. And we have our performance index divided by that to achieve that 73.2. It is an increase from last year. We were at 72.9. So we're inching our way forward. But every little bit helps improve that work. So anytime we're able to move a student that is perhaps projected to be basic to proficient, then that is improving that work. So that performance index, if we go back, that 73.2, I just want to kind of connect the dots on this one, is right in the middle with 3 stars between 70 and 80. So that is the achievement area. And again, one of our highest weighted areas. Equal in terms of the worth is progress. And progress isn't just last year's score. I think it's important to know that too. It represents the past 3 years. Last year counts the most, and it counts as 50%, but 2 years ago count as 25, and 3 years ago count as 25%. So progress, again, is all about growth. It's taking students from where they are and helping them grow at least a year's worth of growth. With our 4 stars, you can tell that this is an area that we have some nice evidence that we did well in this area. It's always been an area that Norwood City School District has said we are able to grow students for wherever they are. We want to grow them at least a year's worth of growth. We talk about that a lot with our teachers. Whatever, wherever the student comes to us, we want to grow them at least a year. It's always been one of our missions, our top kind of goals in the district. So again, just as a reminder, the progress is based on those tests listed at the bottom, 4th through 8th grade reading and mathematics, or really ELA and mathematics, 5th and 8th grade science, and all of the high school end of course exams. And again, it's all about growth. So for those ratings, here is their different ratings and their description. So we're at 4 stars. So 4 stars mean that our growth index was at least 2, and then our effect size is 1. So what that means is there evidence that you grew? And the larger the effect size, the stronger the evidence there is that you grew a student to your best level, to their best level. So what did we expect to see, and then what did we see? And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, because we have 2 different kinds of models going. For grades 4 through 8, in ELA and mathematics, they call it the gain model. So they take last year's score and they say, if you grow more than a year between last year's score and this year's score, then you've achieved this. So it's prior year to current year, 1 year at a time, to see if they maintain their achievement level. So if I took a test and was 701 in 4th grade, they would ask me to be 701, hold my place in line, and grow at least a year to 5th grade. So that's called the GAIN model, and that's for all ELA and mathematics, grades 4 to 8. Now, for 5th and 8th grade science and for all the end of course exams, you notice they don't take those every year. So because of that, they use what's called the predictive model. So they take me perhaps as a 4th grade student, and they predict based on my English language arts and my mathematics how I will fare in 5th grade science. And then as I move through and I get to 8th grade, they've used all those other scores again, and they predict how I'm going to fare in 8th grade. And if I make that goal or I achieve higher than that goal, then I will have made enough growth. So I know that's a little detailed, but I do think it's kind of important to know that there are 2 different models for how they attack growth. From this chart, obviously, from the code below, you would like to see our colors be in the green and the light blue and that grayish navy that appears differently up on the screen. Those are the highest kind of growth levels. Anything that's in yellow, which we don't have this past year, or in red, that means that there is significant evidence that perhaps we fell short of the growth for that particular group of students. I think it's also important to highlight that first row is all grades, all content areas. So that's how we did when we put everything together as a district. We were green and we were light blue, which is there's evidence that we met the growth, and then the light blue is there's significant evidence that we exceeded the student growth expectations. So growth is important to us. All of these components are, but growth is really important to our day-to-day work, and we see evidence of that in what we do. The next component I want to share out about is gap closing. Gap closing, we received 3 stars for this area, which meant we met state standards in closing educational gaps. Gap closing has 8 areas for us. It has ELA and math achievement and growth. It has the OELPA scores, which is the English language assessment for students. It has chronic absenteeism. It has giftedness, which represents 3 of its components, and then it has graduation. You'll see some of these are repeaters in multiple components. Graduation shows itself a couple times, as does obviously the achievement and then the growth. So let's take a more detailed look at these areas. First, the ratings. Again, 3 stars, so that puts us in that 30%, but less than 45 for this particular area. So in more detail, here is our achievement area. Each of our respective student subgroups or student groups have their own set of goals. And those goals change every year for that particular subgroup or student group rather. up until the year 3031 is the last they've kind of rolled it out so far. So it will grow every year. So on the left-hand side, paying attention to the black bar, which represents all students. Let's just focus on that, perhaps. Their goal for all students this year was 90, and we were at 89. So we did not meet that goal. It's a pretty great achievement that we had, quite frankly, but that we didn't quite meet that goal. I think I misspoke. I apologize. But yeah, because my font size is a little too small for me. I'm thinking graduation. So again, the achievement side are the goals are in the dots, the yellow dots, and our bar represents our actual achievement for language, English language arts, and mathematics. The participation rate is in the center. It's at 98.5. Last year, our participation was 97.9. If you drop below 95, which we will never do, you do get a deduction. So in order to be a student group, you have to have at least 15 students. So that's important to know too. We only don't have representation in two of the groups, Native American Indian with Alaskan and also Pacific Islander. We don't have enough students in those particular student groups, but all the other groups, we represent them both in achievement for English language arts and math, and also the area of growth. And growth overall, they just want them to grow to get the gain index of 2. So we're this past year we weren't able to demonstrate to the level we'd like to demonstrate that. Moving on to the graduation within gap closing, this is where my brain was telling me 89 was our bar. That is our black bar for all students. We were at 89. The goal from the state is 90. So you can see how those goals, and if you remember me speaking in the past, you can see how it's changing. So again, a little bit of a moving target. And I think that's also important to know. There's on the right-hand side, the English learners, that represents their work on the OELPA test. And last year, I keenly remember saying, we've made it, but I cautioned us because this is an interesting group of students because once you pass the OELPA, you won't be assessed the next year. So that this group comes in and comes out, and that's what it's supposed to do. So if I'm brand new to the country and I come into Norwood City Schools, I will be given the OELPA, and if I have passed it the first year, then it's reflected there. If it takes me a little longer and I have 2 years worth of data and I'm able to demonstrate some growth but not quite proficient yet, I haven't quite helped us meet that goal finally. The OELPA, as a reminder to you, is a 4-part assessment for students. It is the reading, writing, and speaking and listening skills. All of our students take that assessment as a part of the OELPA. Or we now have what's called the alternate OELPA. So if a student is a student with a disability and they're able to take the alternate OELPA to demonstrate growth in this area as well. So again, we met this last year, but we have a bit of a new group of students that we need to work on our attainment of proficiency. Next in the gap closing is chronic absenteeism. So that is our percentage there is 36.3, and that is a percentage of students that have missed at least 10% of instructional time for any reason, excused or unexcused. So we know there are some valid reasons for not being in school, but those students are part of this bracket as well. And each year they set new goals, and the goal last year was 16.4. Even if you don't achieve that goal, if you reduce your number of chronic absenteeism by 3% for where we are percentage-wise, then we can achieve that goal. So for us, our goal as a district won't necessarily be 16.4% or its new moving target next year. That's a little too strong of a goal, but reduction of the number of students that miss 10% or more of instructional time by 3% is a reasonable goal for us to work on. This is a lot of the gap closing scores are all or nothing. So you either get 0 or you get 5 points. The last area in gap closing, which represents 3 parts of the 8 parts of gap closing, is giftedness. And giftedness is evaluated based on their value added rating, which is really growth. And you can see we met the growth. So our gifted students are growing. That was met. The next area is the performance index percentage. Their goal for gifted is 97.5%, and we were at 96.1%. So we're not quite there for that performance index percentage. And then the last area is identification and services percentage. So we actually pride ourselves on those that we identify, we work really hard to serve appropriately. So this is an area that we continue to make sure that it's accurate and that it reflects the good work. Sometimes when you're at the high school level, you can make a different kind of decision about what you want to do next, and it might not be the honors course or the AP course. So that all that decision making that goes into that might affect that service. But I do feel confident that we serve the students to the best of our ability of those we identify. This particular area isn't quite as simple as that. It has, you have to serve students that represent minority groups. And if they're not identified, you can't really serve that group very well. And that is its own conversation that is pretty detail oriented, I would say. But I am confident that we identify who we serve, or we serve who we identify, and that we will continue to work harder on that. The way there are ways to improve some of this work, and so we will continue to explore those ways as well.
What did you say the percentage was needed for gifted that we didn't meet?
97.5.
Nice.
Just shy of it. Okay, graduation component. So I know we're at 2 stars, but this represents a great deal of work. Our 4-year graduation rate is 89%. And I think that is a really great percentage. Of course, we are going to strive to continue to do better, but this component is based on 2 different parts, and we'll talk about that. We're at 2 stars. We've been at 1 star for probably too long of a time, and so we've moved up to 2 stars. So our 2-star rating is anywhere between 84 and 90% of the component. So here it shows you kind of the breakdown. It is, as I said, a 2-part kind of component. First, the 4-year, the students that start, in this case, it was the fall of 2020 and graduated by 2024. So I should remind us that this isn't the class of 2025. It goes back 2 years to the class of 2024. So graduation is 2 years behind in essence. So it's not just those that walked across the stage in the springtime. It is the group prior. So the group prior's graduation, class of 2024, was 89%. And then the 5-year graduation rate is actually the class of 2023. They, by their 5th year, have we captured any more students? Have a student come back and finish up those last credits he or she might have had? Is a student who was deferred finished a year-long program, which there are some that we use that are appropriate for our students, and that represents the 5-year rate. Using those 2 rates, they combine them and they give them different weighted values. So a 4-year is worth 60% of this component, and a 5-year graduation rate is worth 40%. So when you do that math, that's why this kind of chart is helpful. You can show the measure, and you can see right there in the center, 4-year graduation rate measure is 89 times 60% gives you 53.4. You do the same thing with a 5-year graduation of 80.2 times 40%, they're weighted, and you get 32.1 with an overall percentage of 85.5, which puts us at a 2-star. So I'm going to go back so you can see that that's a 2-star rating. And this is another example of how the rating scale is a little different at the district and school level. So that is graduation. And I know that is a really high important area. So I want to say a couple more details. Our 4-year graduates, we had students in the class of 2024 that dropped out. We had some deferment. We had a few that didn't quite have their credits in place, so they had to come back the next year. So they actually would have come back last year to finish that work. So we had all examples of that. And if you do defer your diploma, we've talked a little bit about this. Right now, you are counted as a non-graduate. That remains the same. Yeah, there's been no
You
movement.
did all that work?
You did do all that
The
work.
work is still in progress. The bill, as it stands, is still holding at the state level. It keeps getting attached to things that aren't passing. And so they keep pulling it back in hopes that they'll be able to attach it as a rider to something that will go through. So the fact that they've kept it and they've kept it whole, it's still intending to be added. I just don't know when, and I keep harping on them about it. So as soon as I hear movement, I'll let you guys know.
That
Still really good.
she is. That 89 is the highest we've been since COVID. We haven't been higher than 89 for that 4-year graduation. Yeah, you can ask questions.
So when the state says they have an average, are you talking 3-year or 5-year or this added up thing?
So when they say they have an
I
average,
heard that the state average. Oh, I thought I heard the state average was 88%. And when they say that, are they talking 4-year graduation or 5-year or this added up thing? How do we compare ourselves to that?
so
Do we
my
use the 89?
my hunch is that they were probably speaking of the 4-year. That's my guess. They didn't say
Right about us,
component.
Because if so, then we're higher than the state average. If that is.
So let me double check it. So before you brag officially, because I wouldn't want you to
Let me know if I can
misspeak.
brag.
You
Yeah.
can still brag about it being the highest since COVID.
Yes. Yes.
So it shows recovery.
It does. It shows recovery. It shows a lot of effort from the students, the families that support the students, the teachers, the support staff at the high school, including especially the counselors and the administrative team led by Mark Gabbard. Like, it shows a lot of effort. That is our highest value item to help students cross over that stage and receive a diploma. It is what we work for every day, honestly. Help them graduate and be prepared for life after graduation. So it is our work, and we there's no way around it. We work a lot and talk a lot about it. The next area is early literacy. So this component, we didn't fare as well as we have historically. So we are down to 2 stars, and let's talk a moment about why. It's made up of 3 components. It's made up of the proficiency in the 3rd grade, just the reading part. So it doesn't include the writing part in 3rd grade, just the reading component. It includes being promoted to 4th grade, and it also includes improving K-3 literacy percentage. So the students who are at risk, are we able to help move them? And they use a fall to fall benchmark for that. So there are 3 parts to this that help us get our component. So if we look at those 3 parts, last year we didn't perform as well on the 3rd grade reading test, just the reading part. So that was a change from the year prior. We were able to promote all of our students to 4th grade, and then the area of improving K-3 literacy for the students that are at risk, were we able to help them beyond benchmark? We didn't fare as well as we had in the previous year. Early literacy is really important to us as well, and we've done a lot of work around the science of reading. So this one hits close to a lot of people's hearts. And they will know that we would like to do better in this. And I have no doubt that we will improve, and we will get back to where we'd like to be with early literacy. The last area is that college and career workforce and military readiness, where we received 4 out of the 5 stars out of the gate. So prior to the business rules being written, these are the stars that we have. Before we knew what counted for what and how we would fare, we knew it was coming, but we didn't know exactly how it would count for us. We are now, the ODE is now the Department of Education and Workforce. So they have changed their name to demonstrate to schools across the state that workforce and military readiness and a career is just as important as college is. So when we think about that rating system, here are how they came up with the ratings and descriptions, and we again are at a 4-star rating. So greater than or equal to 75, but less than 85%. So here, this also is the graduating class of 2024. that 4-year cohort only. So just like graduation 4-year cohort, this is the college and career workforce and military readiness of that same class. So in that class, we had 127 students. 99 of those students were able to demonstrate a level of post-secondary readiness in one of those areas, which brought us to a percentage of 78%, an increase of 9 percentage points before we knew what that exactly meant. So in more detail, I thought it would be really important to see where we were last year and, 2 years ago, and then the class of 2024. So the red is the most recent. That is the class of 2024. And I think what I like about that particular chart is that you can see that we've spent a lot more emphasis on some industry recognized credentialing with our students than we were able to the year prior. In fact, 87 of our students that graduated in 2024 achieved an industry recognized credentialing. About 10% of our students had an honors diploma. Dual enrollment, we had about 9 students do the dual enrollment to the level they expected, but we did have over 103 credits in that. But in order to get that dual enrollment, you have to have at least 12 credits that count. The next area of ACT or SAT remediation free score, we had about 10 students that achieved that area. The AP, we do have a lot of students that take AP, but in order to achieve that bar, you have to have 9 of those credits or more with a score of 3 or above on an AP test. So we had 9 students achieve that. We did not have any military enlistment in the class of 2024, and we did not have any students that completed or accepted an apprenticeship, rather. We had some students complete the pre-apprenticeship. We had more students, 9 students do the CTE technical assessment. We had 5 students do that Ohio Means job with 250 work-based learning hours. And then we had about 13 students, exactly 13 students were proficient on 3 technical assessments. Those are the areas that you're able to get credit for in this component. And if I have 2 of those things, say I'm ACT remediation free and I have a credential, I only count 1 time. So the 99 is really 99 students that achieved this in at least one area, if not more. So I think that the high school should feel really proud. Especially I want to say to the counselor that worked most closely with the class of 2024, Debbie Morehouse, did a great job with all of that detail-oriented work of documenting that for the students. So she was the counselor for that senior group. And then, of course, under Mark Gabbard's leadership and the administrative team, the teachers that supported it, and then the students and the families themselves. So we're happy to get 4 stars right out of the gate for a component we didn't know the business rules of.
So I have a question. How do the students in our district that go to the Oaks count in this?
They could
All of
count.
your industry credentials. That's us.
And no apprenticeship?
Apprenticeship depends on the field. So it also depends on, do we have a student enrolled in a program that offers apprenticeship? So like a welding program, for example, might have an apprenticeship. Just depends on our enrollment for that field.
Sure.
You'll see also the Oaks mostly represented under that proficiency in 3 technical assessments. That's their world, the technical assessments and the CTE technical assessments. We don't currently offer in-house in the Norwood High School that CTE technical assessments and the proficiency level. We do offer industry recognized credentials. So jointly between the Oaks and what's happening in-house at the high school, they can have industry recognized credentialing. Of course, the Oaks students could also have be ACT remediation free before they even are heading that way and be in line for an honors diploma as well.
Okay.
Their specialty is those things that Amber mentioned and then I added to.
Okay.
They also have a new component this year to obtain it's similar to that 12 credit thing. They can receive up to 12 industry point credentials. Only 52% of our school achieved of the full 12 credits. That would be like a college credit plus level of courses. But we had over 96%, I believe, of our students received some sort of industry credential. So all of our Norwood students at least received 1, if not 3 minimum points towards that credentialing for graduation in the last year. So these numbers are about to go up considerably because they just changed the CTE standard.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. So let's move on to the individual schools, because I know that's also of interest. The high school has been the same, really strong 3.5, meeting state standards overall. Their progress remains at the highest mark of that they've had so far, which is 4 stars. And of course, we talked about their graduation moving up 1 star, and then the career and college workforce and military readiness being 4 stars. Those are the areas that I just wanted to draw our attention to as areas of growth that we need to work on. Just as a reminder, of course, the high school would not have any early literacy, so their percentages with achievement and progress being the highest level at 25 and 25, and then gap closing, college and career, workforce and military readiness, and graduation are the complementary components at 12.5%. So for each of the schools, depending on the number of components, those percentages can change just a bit, and we'll see evidence of that. If we move on to the middle school, they also have the same score of meeting state standards at 3.5, a really solid performance in that. They maintained, an area to point out is they maintained that progress of 4 stars, so that growth area that we keep talking about. And they are based on, as you can see, 3 areas. So that would be achievements worth 40%, progress is worth an equal amount. Progress and achievement are always equal at 40%, and then gap closing brings it in at 20%.
So, can I ask a question here as well? How can you take a little bit deeper of a dive into explaining to me how we can have an achievement score that's calculated in the range of a 2-star performance, but be able to grow the kids and have our progress at a 4-star? To me, those things should go more hand in hand. So to have one be at one end of the spectrum and the other one at the other end of the spectrum, I would assume that if our achievement is on the lower end and we're not meeting the standards, then we're not growing the kids. But if we're growing the kids, then
That's a great question.
right.
Okay, so let me give it a shot. So achievement is what it is, how I score on an individual test, and that is calculated. So even if I'm not scoring as well on every single test offered at, in this case, the middle school, I can still have made progress, and a great deal of, between 5th grade to 6th grade. So my growth can still be strong. I just didn't achieve. I grew enough to not only keep my place in line, but I bumped it up a few more spots. So my growth is stronger than my achievement, because the state testing team would argue there's enough room to demonstrate progress regardless of your level of achievement. So even schools where a school that achievement might not be a struggle, their progress could be low because they didn't grow students enough. They didn't grow them a year's worth of growth. They might have achieved relatively strong, but they didn't grow them. They didn't take them from where they are and grow them a year. So what this says to us in part is that although our students might have not have achieved in this particular moment of time at the level that we had hoped or thought, their progress still, they grew more than a year's worth of growth, and there's evidence to support that. So that's how they go together. Which is why sometimes when we talk about our work, we say, let's focus on the growth. Let's not just say, let's get 90%. That seems a bit ambiguous. Let's focus on taking student A as far as student A can go, but at least a year's worth of growth. And let's keep monitoring that to make sure we're making progress and heading in that right direction. So they call progress the great equalizer, because any level of achievement could still show progress, regardless of if you are historically high achieving, you might have low progress, or if you're lower achieving, you might have high progress.
Mm-hmm.
So the achievement is state testing. So you could have a group of kids that test really well, but they don't grow. Or you could have a group that tests really badly, but do well in class on day-to-day work. Is that?
Well, it's still
kind of
both.
different?
Where they started.
For where they, so they're both achievement and progress is based on state testing.
Both are tested.
Both are
Okay, I thought
testing.
achievement, because this one specifically says on state tests. So I thought the
Yeah.
achievement was the state test measurement and
That's
the
true.
progress was on the classroom measurement.
Progress
It's
is
not-
about like where did the state expect you to land in the next year, and I've done better than that. So they expect me to get one score, but hey, I've got some great things going my way. Got some strong instruction. People are paying attention to it, and I've overachieved than what they thought. That's growth.
I think the difference is just achievement is an absolute value, progress is relative to yourself.
That's a nice
Okay.
way to say it.
Yes, good one.
Good one.
So has anybody ever thought about correlating that with whether or not the student is economically disadvantaged?
Yes.
It is. That's why we all think that the testing that they use at the state level is BS anyway. Because which districts do the best?
Right? But, and that's, and all the high achieving districts got really low progress those couple years that they were really freaking out about vouchers. And right when I started, and they were like, you gave us low scores on progress. Well, your kids are already at the top. They can't go anywhere from there.
When report cards first came out, they did have a poverty level on them, and the state chose to remove it.
Because that might make things look more
To answer your question,
fair.
there was a correlation, and the state chose to remove that correlation.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
Right?
I completely disagree with that decision, by the way.
As we all do. Many things that happen.
Thank you for the,
Sure.
thank you for the answer.
Of course. Next up, we have Sharpsburg Elementary. They have a 4-star rating. They've had the 4 stars for the last 3 years, so they've been able to maintain that, and I think that's a success all to itself. Achievement and progress are 33.3% respective, well, each of them, and then gap closing and early literacy, their other 2 components come at 16.667% to make up 100%. So their gap closing was also a strong strength of them, and they maintained a solid early literacy of meeting that goal for them. Norwood View Elementary, if you remember last year, they were at 4 stars. So this 2.5 star rating is what they received this year. So for Norwood View, I will say that they have the same situation, 33.3 for both achievement and progress in terms of the weight, and then gap closing and early literacy are their other 2 components. So you can see how if their progress fell, which it did this time, that's what affected them the most. And you can see that clearly. I will say that Norwood View does a lot of good things really well. A lot of things really well. Among them is their intervention is strong. So I think for them, they'll do some nice reflecting and they'll think about how we can do things a little bit differently to keep moving forward. They had really done really well with their gap closing last year. And so now this is a year for rebuilding, I would say, on their behalf. Williams Avenue Elementary came in at 3 stars. Last year they were a 3.5. This year they're a 3. So again, meeting state standards. They have the same percentage of 33.3 for the first 2 components and 16.67 for the last 2. For them, their drop in early literacy affected some of their work, and that's why they probably lost that 0.5 work for them. And then our last school is the Norwood Montessori School. So last year when I was presenting to you, I said we had a 4 and we were happy to get a 4, but I cautioned us. I remember doing that because I know the rhythm of this work. We were a 1 the year before, we were a 4, and now we're a 1. And it's a bit interesting to see how this is calculated. Of course, they don't have achievement, they don't have progress because they don't have enough students to test in the respective areas to generate a score. So the only things they have to go off of is the early literacy and then the gap closing. And so even in early literacy, they can only evaluate one area because you have to have 15 students in those areas in order for it to even be calculated. I did the math because I was determined to represent them well early literacy, if all of the students that have tested there so far, even though they're under 15 students in a group, if they had been able to count all of the good work they do, because of course they had third graders last year and their proficiency level, and of course they had third graders that moved to fourth grade, they would have been 3 stars, a solid 3-star rating. They are a 1-star rating because it only measured one area, and that is the area of at-risk students and how they performed from year to year, from kindergarten, fall to fall, kindergarten to first, first to second, and second to third. At-risk readers in the area of literacy, did we move them enough? Did they achieve benchmark? And that shows one component. It's just one component, good or bad. It only radiates bad because the other components aren't part of the puzzle. So that's a bit unfortunate. They would have had 3 stars if it had been able to be calculated. The second area that is counted as 50% is gap closing. And there are only a few things that are evaluated on gap closing because we just went through all of our gap closing. They don't have achievement. They don't have the growth, but they do have their chronic absenteeism, and they were off chronic absenteeism, the outright goal of 16.4 by 1/10. So they had 16.5 students chronically absent. And of course, when students are sick, we want them to stay home, and when they're well, we want them to return. So they're very close to the outright goal of 16.4, but they received a 16.5. The other thing that was evaluated was giftedness, and the students that were identified as gifted were served at the Montessori. They just don't have enough students to represent all of the groups, the minority groups that are called upon, because they're just not quite big enough yet. And that's just the truth. And I'm happy to go into that in more detail. But we had toyed with the idea, like, wish they would wait until we are a little more grown. Right now, the chronic absenteeism is based off 64 students. That's a little tough to swallow. And if it was good last year, we said, that's great, we'll take it. But we knew that perhaps they are just like a building that only serves K-2, where sometimes there are 1 and sometimes there are 4. It's a bit tricky for them.
So is it entirely possible to, as this building is growing on its own, and we're going through this roller coaster ride of good scores because, and then bad scores, just because of the growing pains of building up, are we able to just kind of mold them into another building temporarily until they're able to have enough students to, on paper, separate off on their own?
No, because they're their own IRN
Yeah,
already.
they're their own IRA. Just a little bit of history. When charters first started in the state of Ohio 20-some years ago, the first 3 years, they didn't give charter schools a state report card because the statisticians knew you'd have anomalies like that. One year you're a 1, the next year you're 4, you're a 1 again. So they would wait until the 4th year before they ever gave you a report card. And I think that little bit of history probably got lost in translation with all the changes from ODE to the DO. And they really should have done this with any startup school. Your first 3 years, they should not be looking at it. When you've got 8 students in 3rd grade,
I completely agree. I mean, the 8 students that are there did fantastic work.
They did.
Yeah,
they don't count
but they
because they're
don't
not
count.
a cohort.
Right.
So it's a little skewed. Now, next year, I believe we will certainly have enough.
Not quite in 3rd grade yet. We have to wait another year.
I was gonna say, I love what
They're
Mary
small but
said,
mighty.
and I love using this to point out to people, look, the state does things on purpose. My microphone. I love what Mary said. I love showing this part to show people, why did you get this score? Well, the state does things on purpose to make us look bad. And they do not do this to charter schools, as you heard Mary tell us. Charter schools do not follow the same rules we do. And they do this to us. It's a waste. Why would they even? Just to aggravate us. It's cruel.
I'm honestly surprised the most about the reading thing, especially with this coming out of COVID. These were the babies born during the time where you had the most time to spend at home with your kids.
Well-
So the fact that there's a larger gap in this group coming up through
This is
third
the
grade.
at-risk readers. This isn't all the readers.
No, I'm looking at all of the numbers for all of our elementary schools. None of them are meeting expectation, and we're graduating 100% of them to fourth
Okay.
grade. I'm just surprised that back when COVID was happening and we were like, kids are going to be at home, they're going to have to spend more time at home. Hopefully that means more time reading, because we were always concerned that, we don't have enough one-on-one time with our kids. We don't get enough time to read to them. Maybe we're going to see an impact in this group of kind of homegrown kiddos that got stuck inadvertently through COVID. And now we're seeing this gap where there wasn't an improvement. And I'm really disappointed in that number overall now that we're seeing it a few years later. This is the 24 cohort. So those are your itty bitties coming up into those grade levels being tested for reading scores. So I want to see that improvement as they get to like year 26 from 24. Maybe they're a little bit older now. We can start to see that number improve. Personally, I'm hoping that increases quite a bit in the next couple of years. But I'm just surprised that that group of toddlers who went into school right after COVID didn't do better with reading. I was really hoping to see that number increase. And I also want to know, because we're seeing a big dip in math and English scores right when they hit middle school, but they're testing pretty good in elementary school. But then when they get to middle school, we hit kind of a wall and they drop into like 50s and 30s even for their testing. So I want to know what prep we're missing there between like third to fifth grade that's not getting them ready for sixth, seventh, etc., for like their math scores and things like that. But also, what can we do to focus on that middle grade and improve those numbers? That seemed to be the biggest hit, and that's carrying in through high school because the elementaries are doing great, and then we hit a wall. Why are we hitting a wall?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's talk about next steps and what we're going to do differently. We'll start with what you mentioned, the middle school. So it's embedded in here, but let's talk specifically about the middle school, what we're doing differently this year. Because each year, again, we're in a continuous improvement model. So this one moment in time, what it captures and what it tells us and how we react to it are all important. So some of the things that we know are good work is our work around item analysis. We are continuing that, but perhaps with a greater intensity this year. They're meeting with a bit more frequency on and speaking about that's number 3 bullet. What was the test like last year? Let's look at that particular item analysis. And not because that item is going to come back, but rather, what is it about this particular item and how they phrased it? And where did our students get troubled? What was hard for them with this? What was easy for them for this? And identifying that and saying, like, what did we learn from that? Different group of kids, we understand that, but what can we learn from that? Is it that our students struggled with algebraic equations and the way they phrased it? Well, I'm going to start phrasing it that way, perhaps, or I'm going to rethink my lessons in algebraic equations, or perhaps I need to do different kinds of intervention based on the item analysis from last year's test and using that work for this year's. And the way they come together is through what we call benchmarking and checkpoints, which is bullet number 4 and short cycle assessment. So once we learn about the state test that they just took, we start doing checkpoints, like it might be 5 questions after we get through a certain unit. And then what do we know? How did our students respond to those questions? And what does that tell us about what we need, how we need to intervene and how we need to move forward? So I know we've been doing this work for a while, but each year when we have this kind of data, it does make us pause and it makes us come together as teams on our professional learning days and also every day and during the week in the building to talk about how did our students fare, so what could we change instructionally that would affect the next group, and how can we do things differently or continue to do things that worked well to move forward. So, and do our resources that we have support that work. So it's about the resources that we have, following our state standards, my instruction, and then how we assess afterwards. And that cycle of continuation about us revisiting it all year will be a way to improve. It's not something new, but I will say it's perhaps even more detailed and pinpointed this year with some little tweaking and continuing to build awareness. So we don't change all of the work. You just intensify the work, because the work that we do has not been bad, but with each group we say like, oh, how can we ramp this up so that we're meeting the needs of this particular group of students? Or have we seen over the past 3 years, they always struggle with algebraic expressions, so perhaps my resource isn't as high of quality as I thought, and let's use something different. And so we do those things. We also, I hope that answers part of your question.
Part of it.
Okay,
I'm
so
also curious as to, and I don't know the measurements, I don't know why this is the thing, but if our numbers are so low coming from our third grade literacy and et cetera, why are we then passing 100% of our fourth graders on if only 38% of them are passing those literacy tests correctly? I assume like we don't have like a summer program or something for the fourth grade or for third grade and fourth, but maybe that's something we can look into to help bridge that gap, because I want 100% of our kids to go into fourth grade, but if they are not ready to go into fourth grade, it's only going to hinder their progress going forward as
okay,
those standards raise.
that's a great question too. So English language arts, we are at 61% passing for third grade only.
Okay.
So that's lower than we like. We like to be more closer to 80. We were at 77, I think, last year. So it was a bit of a drop for us. So what do we continue to do when that spring final test is complete? That doesn't mean the work is done. So teachers continue to work on intervention with those students. And we do have summer programs. So we had a 3-week summer reading only for third grade while we ran our elementary summer school to do our most intensive work and allow those students to take the third grade test again, or a MAP test to prove that they are ready for fourth grade.
Does that get factored into these numbers?
Only the third grade. They can alternatively pass a MAP and be promoted to fourth grade. Now, there is a way around it that's going to be removed this year, but I'll complicate it for just a minute, but know that it's going away. So in the end, if you have, say you have a student that did not pass on the state test, did not pass an alternative way through taking the MAP test in ELA, then as a parent, the parent could say like, I don't really like them to be retained in third grade. I'd rather you do what you think is best, which is promote them to fourth grade and intervene. Most of the research that they would hear and say is if a student's attending third grade every day and they fall short of achievement, do not hold them back. That doesn't help their work. Instead, promote them to fourth grade and do a lot of intensive intervention, which is just what we're doing. So we did have some students that fell short on the reading test. Some of them passed the alternative test that they're allowed. Some of them did not, and we were able to move them to fourth grade, which is more in keeping with our belief system of keep kids at their age appropriate level and intervene, because we know that the more they're retained, the less likely they will make it to graduation. And that's our goal too. So we know how to intervene, we know what to do, and we think that we can do that just as well in fourth grade as we could have in third grade. Sometimes we retain, but usually those cases are when students have missed so much school that it becomes necessary. They haven't had the experience. We can't recreate that same situation. And there are other factors, then those are big conversations with teams of people that look at a particular student and their needs. So,
But those new scores, if a student retakes that test, will override that previous testing score. for the
only in
report card?
third grade and only in ELA and only if they take it. So some kids don't, we know that's not a good thing to put them through in the summer. We allow them to alternately pass a MAP reading test, and they do. It feels a little less stressful, to be honest, to them. They're like used to it. They're like, oh, I do this. And they outperform. And
So
they're
if they
able.
retake in fourth grade, it doesn't matter. Whatever score they got in third grade is the one that gets reported for the state.
It is. That alternative test does never gets
Never
reported to the
reported.
state.
Okay.
Well, we document it, so if ever called upon, we would say like, here's how that student was able to go to fourth grade. It was not through the state testing. It was through a different test we were allowed an alternative test.
Is that something that we could see? Because I would love to see our actual numbers for what these look like. Because this may not be a fair assessment for our fourth graders if I'm looking at these numbers individually versus 100% of them pass on. We're obviously testing and we're supporting in other ways, but these numbers don't reflect that work. So
So-
is there a possibility
Yeah.
to see that?
We can share that. It also, that what I just described, the parent's ability to sign ahead a student is being removed this year anyway. So, but I will show you the actual number of students who, in the end, parents said, I'd like them to go to fourth grade and receive the intervention.
Do we have the data? If you go back to that previous slide that you were at, do we have the data on a more regional or state level as to how similar districts to us fared in this?
I was looking, yeah, it's on the report card, so I was looking at the same thing.
Okay.
And is that a similar
Yeah.
age range that has
Are
that
you
same hump?
Third grade, or, because I was looking at this.
Right. So, because what I would like to know is, is that 61%, I'm just using third grade as an example here, is that 61% significantly off from the state average?
So the state average was 59, so we achieved 61. So we're higher than the state average
So,
for third grade. And it changes every year. of course.
I
Yeah.
know it changes every year, but the point I'm trying to make here is that maybe these results is more indicative of an inefficient testing process,
Oh, well, yeah.
not.
But that's why I was wondering if there was something else.
Well, I mean, but what I'm saying is if somebody's just looking at these numbers and they don't know and they don't do their due diligence to take a deeper dive into this, they just go, well, shoot. I mean, it starts in third grade. You're not teaching kids how to read,
Right.
and when the case may be, no, we're doing fantastic work,
But it's not being measured.
it's not being measured accurately.
Yeah.
And you're
Mrs.
right, we need
Ronan-
another column
But
with the
that's why I
state
said I wanna
average to
see-
put it all in perspective.
Well, I mean, honestly, one of the notes I've written down, constructive criticism here. Seeing what the state average is, and then also because you've referred back to previous scores from last year a couple times now, I would love to see that on there as well, so we could see. I understand that the benchmarks change a little bit, so it's not like a rank apples to apples comparison, but it's nice to see that, hey, if last year we were at 59% and this year we're at 61%, but the state average is 57.5%. At least that gives us some context as to what we're comparing ourselves against, instead of just sitting here thinking,
Christina
Are we
does
missing
have
the
that
boat?
data. I think she's got it on 2 sheets of paper because I've seen it. So we will get that too.
no. I mean, it's fine. I'm just saying I'm a visual person.
No,
Yeah.
no. And she's
Me
got
too.
it coded in green and
And that's
yellow
why I
and
wanted
red
I have
too.
it right here.
Yeah, she's got it right there. I knew she did.
So I could move it over if you want to see it this evening, or
No, I'm okay.
okay.
So-
All right.
That's mostly why I'm asking, because when I see these numbers, it's like you don't know what the work is for remediation. You don't know what the in-between testing is. I don't know if we can count those scores for retesting or how they weight them. It's really hard,
One thing, like what I've been thinking about for a long time, is like purpose of a summative assessment is to, like, that isn't lagged. It's telling you like what happened to the cohort that has already moved on, but what you can do as a district is say this is what our product is, which is like this level of proficiency across grade levels. What are the decisions that we make because of that? And I do wonder about like the downstream effects of this, because then, and I don't know the answer to this, but like when we go then down to the college and career readiness, and so we see like these proficiencies as measured by like academic achievement, and then we look at where we are as the district as measured by college and career readiness, like honors diplomas, dual credit enrollment, ACT or SAT remediation, AP score of 3 or better. I just wonder what is the connection between like the preparation in like early grades and how that like fleshes out over time to graduation, and like where our seniors are. And so I don't know what the answers are, but I think that there's a connection there of like the emphasis that we're placing on different things. And I'm new, so I'm just still learning, but it just is something I'm wondering about.
The English and math definitely play in huge for that ACT and SAT testing ability. Our industry readiness, a lot of kids are hands-on. and they're exploratory learners. They want to get their hands on an experiment. They want to build a machine. They want to do something, touch something, and they're succeeding at it. And we're proving that in these numbers. These kids are actively involved in their working process. Sitting them down and being a traditional book learner doesn't seem to be the norm now. So we have to shift with where these kids'
Well, I
learning
think
skills are.
I think it's both.
It is
think
both.
It's that we need to prepare students academically, and that's our job as a school district, and like provide, and we kind of talked about this, but like, and know who our students are and what they're, and I think you all do a really good job at that, but like know what students' interests are and provide them opportunities for those.
I will say our work we're starting with the ESC, looking at that data, where we have a new data partnership with the county where I wrote it down as soon as you said it, because the way we're collecting this data and using it, those are the kind of questions you can ask the system. So that might be our first one to put it.
It's probably important to know, in line with where we above the state, which is actually one of Mrs. Ronan's first questions to me, like, Christina, how do we compare to the state? Show me where we're above the state. And so the high school was above the state in every content area except for geometry last year. So they were the leaders in beating the state in all of those areas. I think that is important, and that is Mary Ronan's first question to me when I bring her the test scores.
There's something to compare it to.
Well, and I think like we've gone down this emphasis, like we're really emphasizing third grade literacy, which is really important, but there are some things to celebrate. Like I think our high school scores are really solid, and our graduation rate is up a whole star. That's really significant. That's not easy to do.
Just a couple other next steps that we're doing, besides continuing our BLTs and DLTs, our district leadership teams and our building leadership teams. The key to all of this work is in our teacher-based teams, where they come together as teachers in grade levels and work through a student's progress and make new plans for that student. If I go down a couple bullets, we are piloting a new math resource this year in grades 12, K to 12. So some of our colleagues are testing out new math resources for us. We still are part of the state-sponsored math intervention program. We continue to meet weekly for this graduation team to support that data collection. And then we continue with our content area, so the reading and the math and science and social studies, professional learning. We're also piloting a new intervention program that is among the few that are approved by the state of Ohio for reading intervention. So some teachers have said, let me test it out with my group of students, and it counts as intervention for those students. It's adaptive. So if I'm missing a phonics component in my work, or I'm low on comprehension, it'll help build that as a strength for me. So we're testing that out right now. And then monitoring. We know that we need to monitor our student progress through data collection. And as Joe Westendorf just shared, we have a new opportunity to do that a little bit differently that we think will help our work. So those are the kinds of things that we're paying attention to. But all of this is just as important as it is to you. It's equally as important to us. So I appreciate the time that you allowed me to share it with you. And I'm always happy to field any questions that you might have.
Yeah. Does anybody have any additional questions?
I guess the only other one, before I guess we would discuss it, have you guys sat down and said, based on these numbers, what are some realistic goals? Obviously, the measures change. They're arbitrary. It's how the testing goes. But working off of this model, have you said, okay, we want to see this much improvement, or we expect to see this much improvement with the next cohort?
We have, as a part of our 3-year plan, we've set a goal of improvement of 4% each year within those 3 years. So I think to your point, where we fell short, dropped a little bit more, that improvement might need to be a little bit stronger to keep us in pace. So the first year we did it, we were really pleased with our progress, and we could highlight in green all of our 4% increments that we increased. And now it gets a little more complex towards the end of this, where we just finished year 2 of our 3-year plan, to kind of say oh, we didn't make it this year, or we dropped back a percentage, and is that percentage enough to warrant a shift and a big pivot, or is that just about right there? So we have all those conversations, and those happen with our district leadership team. They helped us set the 3-year plan in place, and then the building leadership team kind of rolls that plan out to each of the buildings. So we do have goals, and then each of the buildings have, they have at least the 4% goal, but I would guess that in some areas they want to be stronger than even 4%. And third grade, it is an important year for us, and it's just the beginning of this work in terms of state testing, and they are 8, and so we take all of that into consideration, and we keep our focus. We want to do really well on the test. We keep our focus on the child. We want that child to be a reader and a mathematician, and we want to support them as they move through our school. So we do keep that. We do set goals for improvement for each of those areas. Yes.
Any other questions?
No questions, but I just have a few little things to add, kind of piggybacking on your question. So as a district, we also have of course, wearing my special education hat today, but we do have a district least restrictive environment team where we sit down and we really evaluate our students who are do have disabilities. So this year we are offering resource rooms in our middle school just to provide those students some additional supports that need more support than what they would be receiving in like an inclusionary setting, but aren't as intensive enough to need like a specialized classroom. So we are providing that at our middle school and high school, along with some life skill components that we're also embedding. In addition, a lot of our students do have come to school with just a lot of mental health and some needs in that area. So at all 3 of our elementary schools, not including the Montessori at this time because we're still a little small, but we are offering Kids Thrive, which is a school-based mental health program within our building. So rather than having our students go to like a different site to receive those mental health services, they're receiving that within our schools. So we're doing things from a student services lens as well to help with that achievement across the board for different types of students. So I just want yeah, sure.
I do have 2 things I want to just take a little bit of a deeper dive on as you made your presentation. I was just writing down notes. The first item is the chronic absenteeism value. I don't know if you want to scroll back to where that was in the slideshow. Yeah. So can you explain to me how that number is calculated? Is that just like is literally 36.3% of our students chronically absent, or is that a much smaller percentage number of our students that are the primary contributors to that 36%?
That's a great question. So chronic absenteeism isn't a straight percentage. It is only the students who have missed at least 10% of instruction time for any reason are calculated into that. So it's not your attendance percentage. So on a given day, we can have a 91% attendance rating. But if I'm a student who've missed more than at least 10%, which comes to like a day a month, then I would be considered chronically absent, and I would go into this percentage for that. So it's not just you have to have missed 10% and then get put into chronic absenteeism.
But yes, your second part, you're correct. It is a small number of students. All of us in here don't miss that much. It'd be, let's say, you and Eleni would be the 2 who have not great attendance that brings the percentage down.
Right.
We know the families that we need to target because it's usually
No, I get
a
that.
small number of families. So it's not everyone across the board.
Right. I just, it's an important distinction for me as a board member. You know, if you're just looking at that number again as a ranked number and you say, oh God, more than a third of our students are chronically absent. And no, so the answer is it's a much smaller percentage that is the bulk contributors to that number.
Just a small number of families who are chronically absent can really push that percentage up, and that's what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have 3 or 4 children in the family, and they're all chronically absent. So that can really impact that score.
Gotcha. And what interventions do we have in place to kind of help that, if you don't mind me asking that question?
So we have intervention assistance teams at each of the buildings. So they receive, when you meet a certain number of hours that you've missed, you'll receive a letter, besides the daily phone calls that you get if someone is absent. You'll get your child isn't here, or parents call in and let them know why. If you meet a certain threshold, you'll get a letter sent home. Then you'll be invited in to talk about a plan for your child, where you come in and you say there's a little team around the table. Could be the principal, could be the counselor with the principal, could be someone at the high school level. We have actually an attendance person that supports it, where they sit around and they say, tell us the story. Why is this really hard? And what do you need? What can we offer you that might support this, if there is something? And so you kind of talk about the challenge. Sometimes the challenges are more than just, it's not just about coming to school. There are other things going on in the family. And then we have supports in place that come in and say, okay, how about this? Would this help the work? Would this help you organize the family structure so that the child can come to school? We also have had students who have missed or been considered chronically absent because of an extended illness or a medical situation. So they're all factored in here
Or
as
if they're
well.
suspended right away, if you're suspended for 10 days.
Yes.
Okay.
That moves you
So it's
quickly into chronically
excused
absent.
or unexcused. So even if I had a medical need that needed me to recover from a surgery perhaps or something, or have an extended stay in the hospital, it's excused absence, but you're still considered chronically absent.
Out of curiosity, what's the point of having an excused absence? They're not excusing it. They're measuring it and they're counting it against us. So if
You're
it's
correct.
an excused absence, then it's an excused absence.
I think of that every time
Yeah.
I suspend a child. Not only, suddenly making that child chronically absent.
There was a time that we thought they might separate it out, but it never came to fruition. So it is excused or unexcused. The importance of knowing, though, however, is to say that tells me that if someone's calling in, okay, we have a connection, we're doing okay. We know why you're not here. We know you're coming back tomorrow. Those are all really good relationship communication things so that the school knows here's the situation. They'll be back tomorrow. They have a fever. They're recovering from a sickness and we're good. We're talking about it. We're working through it.
But they still receive the automatic notices. If you have a kid who's chronically ill or something like that, they're still going to get that letter. They're still going to get put on that list. They're still going to get that thing that says, like, we could threaten you with court or whatever. Like, there's still those things that those kind of families don't need that extra
So
stress.
we write
We've updated
notes.
that.
Yeah,
Good, okay.
we write notes and we call and we
Yeah,
say,
like, please ignore this terrible
Yeah.
letter I'm
Yeah,
being forced
Yeah.
to send.
I've had to call the parent and just say, sorry. I
It's
have to
just
send
like-
it. I-
yeah, we write notes and we talk about it and we explain and we say, we know, we understand, this letter is required because oftentimes these are required by
We
law.
have a state
Right.
law.
But we understand the situation. No need to come in. We
But it
wish you
sucks
the
that there's
best.
no room in there for us to say, we understand this is a mitigated circumstance here. We can't expect this same treatment towards this family because this student is at Children's Hospital 90% of the time. Like, well, okay, we can override that. We should be able to click in the system. There's a
And we're
reason.
not able to.
I mean, not for this purpose, but at least for kids who are absent with reason. It's the kids who are without reason that the courts are,
Right.
I would argue.
But the
not
fact that
enough,
there's
but-
no way to
You're right. you can't
differentiate that in the
differentiate.
system and for them to judge it, it's excused or unexcused,
Right.
but we're dinged for it.
Which.
So it
doesn't-
doesn't
it's
make
not real
sense.
data.
Then it's not excused
Yeah.
in my book.
And we would never take someone to court that we knew.
I just hate that
Yeah.
we're getting dinged on a number that we know isn't the fault of a student. They're not just skipping school. They're not,
Well-
getting in trouble. These kids are just not there.
So my next question to this is, if we know this data, maybe it's on the thing that Alinea pulled up earlier, is what is the state average for chronic
I
absenteeism?
think it's 26%.
So they're not even meeting their own benchmark.
No, the state wouldn't meet 16.4. No.
So
We have
Look at
to
our
meet
number,
outlandish,
if we took out the kids
goals
who
that
have
nobody can attain.
excused, what would our number actually be?
It's a problem.
I
throughout
don't
the
know the
I can
answer to
look it
that.
up.
Yeah.
I would love
You
to
say
know
it so
what our
politely.
absentee
Might take 'em.
actually is.
Yeah, it
No.
doesn't, it's a more than 5-minute deal.
But I would love Excuse the excused and tell me what that number actually looks like.
Well, I mean, so I was
You know?
I was eventually going to get to there is, I mean, can you share with us what that small percentage number of our student population base is? It 5%? Is it 7%? Is it 2%?
I don't have that with me.
Yeah,
right
but
now.
I mean, it doesn't have to be answered like right now
Yeah.
tonight. I mean, but that's kind of what I
They're
right.
measuring it by days, not by number of students.
Right.
If we just said it's 6 students that do this, that number would be significantly lower. They're looking at instances
Right.
across the board.
Yeah,
And
and then
they do it by hours.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
By
right.
So
hours.
like if you have to take your kid to the orthodontist, then your hour that you are gone there gets added into that. I just had to make appointments today where I'm gonna have to get my kids out of school.
so the last item that I just wanted to touch on and get a little bit more clarification on is on the slide. Is the identification and service percentage for our gifted students at that 66.9%. I listened to what you said and it was confusing. And so if we can just, I want to understand, because
Okay.
in my mind, if we have identified a gifted student and we are providing them the services needed in order to, get them where they need to be, why, I mean,
So it's about points. So even if I say I'm serving 20 out of 20, it's not just, oh, you serve 100%. It's out of the 20 out of 20, how many of them were K to 2, because that carries more weight than older grades. How many of them were representative of economically disadvantaged or of a minority group, and that carries points. So it's not just identify and serve, it's identify and serve within these other parameters. So it is a bit complex. Happy to share it anytime,
yeah.
because it requires moving from slide to slide and going back and making sure you do a perception check to like, wait, what did that just say? So you use all the slides and then go back and forth so that you can understand where they get the number they get for that.
Yeah, wait, I may want to actually do that with you.
All right.
Because even that explanation
It's confusing.
made no sense to me.
I know. I'm
D&D
sorry.
4th edition makes more
Because-
sense than this does.
What does?
It's like D&D 4th edition makes more sense than this does, and that is saying
I'm-
something.
But I was gonna say, as you know from looking at these things for years and seeing what the state does to us, it's obviously a game the state has come up with to make things overly complicated so that we look bad.
Well, I mean,
I mean, like, why? Why would we be dinged because we didn't have enough gifted children K through 12? Why are we dinged because we didn't have enough gifted children in a certain racial box? That is silliness,
yeah,
Happy to go over it.
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyone wants to do a one-on-one about giftedness or any report card stuff, happy to do it.
Having to
Yeah.
watch us do it now, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, am I right in thinking that is it a weighted average that like certain groups, like if K to 2 counts more for the
You
identification?
generate more points in K to 2 than you can in the older grade.
But where do you get the denominator factor that gives you the percentage?
The point value, what percentage, what your points are, what the total they said you could have achieved, the percent of that.
And how do they identify K to 2 necessarily, since we
As
don't
the
start
target?
testing till 3rd grade?
Okay, yeah. So we test in 2nd grade. We do test in 2nd grade for giftedness. We whole group. So
But it's not measured.
It is.
It is.
So we have 3 opportunities to be identified as gifted in grades 2 through 8 currently with our MAP test that we take, the NWEA MAP test. It's in reading and it's in math. So you can be identified for the areas of achievement in those 2 areas. We also offer an IQ test, which is considered the superior cognitive test in whole grades 2 and 5. ACT also counts later, but by that time, we would have solidified some other things. Very rarely do we have a new student to that unless they've moved in. So we start testing for giftedness whole group in grade 2. Now, we are a small school, so oftentimes you have to remember our subgroup size has to be at least 15. So in our small school, if we don't capture at least 15 second graders, we don't make enough in that K-2. So this year, we are testing our second graders like we typically do in fall and then in winter. And then if we don't capture enough students, we will open the test to another whole grade level test in first graders if we need to see if we can support this work and reflect the hard work.
So you mean out of all of our second graders, we need 15 of them to register as gifted for it to even count?
That's correct.
And we get dinged if not enough K through
In-
2
yeah, in each
are
subgroup.
in there, but we don't test
In
till
each
second
subgroup.
grade. So how do we even know if they're gifted?
So we don't. We offer to families, if I'm a parent of a kindergartner and I think to myself, I've seen some evidence, they're part of this creative thinking thing, they've done this program, I think I might want to request giftedness to be evaluated. So we do that individually all the time for families if needed, but we offer on 3 occasions from second grade to 8th grade for that. So if a parent of a second grader says, I'd like you to evaluate, we say, would you like to do it immediately or would you like to wait till our next grouping in December? And they often say, just wait till December, that's fine. And then we move forward. So we do some individual testing as parents have requested it. Or if a teacher came to us and said, in K and 1 in particular, I think we should evaluate this student. It doesn't change. I want to keep in mind that our good work that we do in K and 1 with students that are of a higher ability, they already differentiate. Teachers are really good at that. They'll say, this student's reading on such and such a reading level, I will provide this opportunity for them. So we do that without the test. And then in collaboration with families, if they come to a conference and say, hey, this is what I'm noticing at home, and oh, by the way, they've done this program out in the city and they've done this, and I think we should think about this, and then we move forward with that. So guardians can request it, but we also offer whole group testing.
If those kids test early, do those numbers still count in our cohort reading? Like like when they do the test in December, if that kid tested earlier, do we get to hold that
Yeah,
group?
we hold it. Yeah.
If they tested in first grade, do we hold it for their second grade
We do.
reporting?
So you would have 2 grades come together. Chances are you'll meet the 15 student goal. Once gifted, always gifted. So if you identify as gifted in kindergarten, you are always considered gifted. We also have felt like second grade is a really nice time to begin that kind of work because students know how to play school. That's not going to be a hindrance. They'll be able to reflect what they really know, and second grade seemed appropriate for that.
Okay.
But we may be going to first grade. We need more numbers.
Because we got to play the game.
You go back to just TIFs.
That is not on my slide deck. Well, I appreciate all the time and the attention to this. And we do think this is important. It is something we work on a lot, but we also are very proud of all the other things that we do in the district that highlight our strengths as a school, as schools, and as a district. And those are important measures of our success as well.
Well, I want to thank the work that you do and the administration, all the building leadership teams and the district leadership teams that, we get a glance and an overview of this, whereas the work is just done, weekly, daily, monthly, throughout the year, every year. So I want to thank you for all that hard work. Any other questions, comments? All right. We're going to move on in our agenda. So section 5 is personnel. I'll turn the floor over to Superintendent Ronan for recommendations.
Thank you, President Atwood. 5.01 is resignation, and I want to thank Morgan Love for your service over the years, but she is resigning. Sections 5.02, employment. I would like to welcome 2 new individuals who are going to be educational aides and student assistant aides, replacing, one of them is replacing Morgan. Then under athletics, we are hiring coaches for the winter, and these are our certificated people. Down below, we will also be hiring some of our other individuals from ASME as coaches. Avenues for Success continues to hire because, they did get a late start to the withholding of federal funds, so they're still trying to make sure they have enough individuals. Then we do have a stipend for Mr. Walkett. Thank you for the marching band assistant. And I know last Saturday our band was in Columbus at a performance. Now we also have under item number 3, a change in status. This is an individual current employee who is simply changing into a different position within the district as allowed per the contract. And number 4 is a classified sub. It's always exciting and helpful to have someone, extra staff member to fill in when someone's absent. So we usually don't get subs, so this is very pleasant. Then on the bottom, pupil activity contracts. These are more of our coaches, as you can see, for winter sports that we are hiring. So it was a short list tonight because, we have done most of our hiring already. So thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Ronan. Next on our agenda is item number 6. This is the Education Committee, and I'll turn it over to fellow board member, Mrs. Rarica.
Thank you. We've got some field trips. The high school has some this time, 11th and 12th graders going to the Hamilton County Recorder's Office and also to Mount St. Joseph. Norwood View first graders are going to La Rosa's, Montessori kindergarten to the fire station. That'll be a short walk. And the Montessori 3rd and 4th graders going to Queen City Food Quest. That is good. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7 on our agenda, this is the Policy Committee report. Mr. Taylor is absent today, so I'm going to turn the floor back over to Mrs. Chesson.
Thank you.
Because you haven't talked enough.
I have not. Thank you, President Atwood. I'm happy to share in our policies and descriptions. This evening, we start our second reading this month of the 8 policies that we discussed last month. The first 2 policies, student withdrawal from school and weapons in school. Student withdrawal from school, JECE, and weapons in school, JFCJ. Both of those are have changes based on House Bill 29. And they updated the driver's license suspension penalties in both of those policies. The next policy, evaluation of professional staff, AFC-2, that has some changes reflective of House Bill 33 legislative changes, which impacted the terminology of the old ODE and the State Board of Education. So those have been changed. The next policy, Innovative Education Programs, IGCB, that policy has been retitled and revamped. It allows for districts to submit ideas for programming for approval, and it has some additional changes reflective of House Bill 33, which impacts the terminology of ODE and State Board of Education. The next policy, Computer Online Services Policy, EDR-R, it's actually a regulation that has added a few changes to safeguard our district's technology devices and safeguard student information. The next policy, Administration of Federal Grant Funds, DECA, is revised to reflect changes in the uniform grant guidance requirements that we spoke of last month. The next policy, Purchasing Procedures, is actually a regulation, DJF-R, and that the district had made some changes to its blanket PO procedures. The next policy, use of cell phones and electronic communication devices by students, is JFCK. That is a policy that we revised to reflect the changes in the based on the new ODU model policy for cell phones and electronic communication. So those are the 8 policies or regulations for your consideration as a second reading this month. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Chesson. We'll move on to, or does anybody have any questions regarding those policies? No? All right. Now we'll move on to item number 8, Building and Grounds Committee, and I'll turn the floor over to Vice President Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 3 requests. The first is for intercity soccer. They'd like to use Shea Stadium Field for practices and games. They have quite an extensive list this year. They have 62 dates on the calendar listed from October through May. The group has sent in their liability insurance, and Intercity Soccer is donating $500 to our athletics organization, and they're requesting the remainder of their fees waived. We have waived fees for them in the past, but it is an extensive request, so it's just something to consider. Second request is for Seven Hills Schools. They have used our pool for swim team practices Mondays through Thursdays. They have dates listed from October to February. And they've been using the pool for years. They've already worked it out with the athletic department after priority is given to our swim team. We are also in receipt of their liability insurance as well. The third request is from New City Presbyterian Church. They'd like to use the Shea Stadium for a flag football game, November 22nd. They've used it in the past. It's for their men's group. They've been a really good community partner to us. They're the ones that donated the shelter at Sharpsburg Primary for the playground area. So those are the three requests that'll be presented next week.
All right. Thank you, Vice President Ballard. Any questions about any of the facility usages? No. We'll move on to item number 9 in our agenda. This is the Finance Committee, and I'll turn the floor over to our treasurer, Mrs. Camphouse.
Thank you, Mr. President. 9.01, the financial reports, the CFO report, monthly financials, and change order spreadsheet are attached for your review. 9.02, permanent appropriations, which is our budget for the year. 9.03, admitted certificate estimated resources, which is our estimated revenues for the current year. And 9.04, a special education agreement with Therapy Works Cincinnati to provide substitute therapy staffing for a long-term absence. That is all I have for finance.
Thank you, Mrs. Camphouse. Does anybody have any questions regarding any of the finance items on the agenda? Nope. We'll move to item number 10, and this is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.